Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to our conversation. I'm Cullum Lyon. I'm the Youth Ministry Coordinator here at St. Anne's Parish in Saskatoon. And with me, as usual,
I'm Father Matthew. I'm the pastor here at St. Anne's.
Good to see you, sir.
Yeah, you too.
Are we officially halfway through Lent, I think?
Close to?
Close.
Yeah.
I always forget the exact amount of days, but we're about there.
40 days.
We're solidly into Lent now.
Yeah.
But I know Lent is penitential season, but some good news, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe to start.
Yeah, so I get people may have heard, hopefully by now, by the time this gets posted, is the government is, as our COVID numbers go down, they feel they got some more control over the situation, hospitalizations going down, they're beginning to reopen things. And I was a little bit surprised, actually. I knew it was coming, but I think it'd be quite this soon, that the two things that they're reopening first are household gatherings getting bigger. I think up to 10 people of a couple of households you can gather. And number two was churches. And I know we've been pushing really hard with the government, saying that the restrictions we had were too tight and were unjust. And yeah, we're the first group to be reopened, which is pretty exciting.
There you go.
Yeah.
You know, some might say overdue or whatever,
Yeah.
but we're excited nonetheless. Especially, some of us were preparing and thinking for Easter, and last year where we were all basically at home, just a few of you in the church to stream it. That I know a lot of us, that was like worst case scenario. Was like, just as long as we, that's not a reality this year. And so the idea of having maybe not like a full church, but the much more than it has been recently, 150, and being able to have multiple, services, we'll get a good chunk of the community in, and just real exciting.
Absolutely. And even the fact of for the Easter Vigil, at 30 people, we could not fit everybody who wanted to become Catholic at the Easter Vigil. We're going to have to split that up. Some at Easter Vigil, some on Easter Sunday. But now to have all of our RCA community all at the same Mass, heading to church together will be really nice.
And most of their families and that whole deal. And, that's a good problem to have, that we got too many people want to be Catholic, for COVID. But
another thing I love, too, with this opening is the day that our capacity goes up is March 19th, which is the feast day of St. Joseph in the year of St. Joseph.
I didn't even think of that.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were going to say for a local reason is we have Source, our musical adoration evening, is on the 19th, which is also the Feast of St. Joseph. Wow, look at that power thing.
Yeah.
So that'll be kind of our first thing, I guess, that we can add a few more folks in there. So if you haven't, look forward to that. And the sign up hopefully we'll add some more spots here.
Yeah, it'll come out this Friday.
Probably
and also
weekend.
Both Source sign up and also probably the rest of March, the numbers going up will all be opened up on Friday.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. That'll get all communicated through our snapshot and online and all that fun stuff. But
another thing too that I'm very aware of course, is as our numbers go up, like our precautions need to be that much more on as well, and they have been. But just a reminder to ourselves and everybody of the masking, the distancing. We've been doing that well and safely, and we need to just be that much more aware as numbers go up.
Yeah, we're not going to take anything for granted. And I think, that was part of it, is to say, like, we've been doing the work, and it showed, we've been able to keep people safe. And so I think maybe that was hopefully giving them confidence to say that we can do this.
Open up the numbers.
And we're not going to be lazy at this point, as we've come this far. But just really exciting to see some more faces, and, the idea of getting back to Mass and being able to see all my nieces and nephews at the same Mass together and that kind of stuff, even distance. It'll be real nice. I'm looking forward to it.
I was getting tired of Mass with only 30 people. And it's an odd thing I find for me as a priest, because most people, their struggle in the pandemic is not getting to Mass enough. Whereas for priests, it's more and more Masses for less and less people. And even to remind myself, but some of the Masses, to be honest, think, man, like just for 30 people. But I know for those 30, it's their only Mass in the month. Yeah. So important to keep going. But it'll be really nice to have more people there.
Yeah, just a weird season, a weird dynamic, and
but just in time for Easter, which is perfect.
Yeah, and I was hopeful. My hope is in the Lord, but also practically that the government would start to be, hopefully reasonable to us and our requests. And no, it's good times. I just posted out in one of these Facebook like youth minister leader groups, and we had a youth night last night, and I said, like, it wasn't the best youth night of all time, and it wasn't the worst. I said, but it felt sort of normal, and right now that just feels great.
A lot,
and I said, like, it was just another week of building relationships, and that feels great, and with all the pivoting and moving around, there is this sense of we can start to recapture a little bit of the normal life of the parish, and we're trying. And a few weeks into doing Youth Alpha here now, and it's just been kind of a little life-giving to see. We're we're starting to be able to do a little bit more, and
Yeah.
we're more attuned to what we can accomplish. And
I know a lot of the homes in the area that we serve, they're getting vaccinated now, which is nice. And maybe still waiting to see what that'll mean for us being able to get into probably more ministry there. But it's looking hopeful too for some of the people who've, like, there's some of the homes I haven't been able to get inside there since March.
Yeah.
But it looks now like they're willing to open up a little bit more. So
yeah, it's I think they're hosting. Is there some online vigil for the 1 year anniversary? I think that's like next week. It's pretty crazy to think. We're coming up on essentially a year of it. I know for us, it's interesting that starting up Youth Alpha here. It was literally the day after we started Youth Alpha last March that everything got shut down.
Oh,
so
man.
it seems like it's kind of the bookend of
You're back again.
The different seasons of it. But and to me, I've just felt a little bit of a renewal of a sense of like, okay, let's start. We're doing the work, but also preparing of like welcoming people back and going there to say like, this is not good. I mean, COVID might be around, but this idea of how we've been living will not be forever.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can catch yourself in that mindset, and even the fact I had shared of both my parents in Alberta were able to get vaccinated this weekend.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And I was like, wow, like I might be able to hug my parents soon.
Yeah.
And then another province, and as silly as that little phrase sounds, it really kind of just made my day to think about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of expanding and opening, we're continuing to expand our hearts, hopefully, and building freedom. This is a series in Lent. You want to set the table for us?
Yeah. So that's been the theme of building freedom, both our Lenten disciplines building freedom in us, and most of all, the Lord through that building freedom in us. Mm-hmm. And freedom, we talked about being not bound by fear, doubts, weakness, error. Not that we're not going to have those things, but not letting those things stop us from loving, doing what is right. Mm-hmm. That's been the kind of freedom we're talking about. And the particular focus I wanted to use for this homily in light of the readings was the idea of the right ordering of desire. And that's one of those kind of philosophical-ish phrases that can be intimidating at first, but really all it means is that what we desire is what's actually good. And if what we dislike is what's actually bad. So uniting that, both what we want with what is objectively good. Mm-hmm. And I think I used the example of cookies and bacon at the very beginning. And I would not say that these things are good in themselves, but to a certain amount they're good, and we desire them. Right?
There we go. I mean, I'm definitely on the bacon fan club side, but there is a true of like you eat a whole pack of bacon. You're
not going to feel so good.
Yeah, maybe not an objectively good thing, right? Yeah. I'll agree to that. Yeah, for sure.
But bacon in moderation is pretty good. But then, of course, the more serious is when it comes to moral issues. Yeah. And this is a thing that I'm sure everybody can experience, that there are times when my desire are for things that are not good. And might it be I desire things that are not good for me, and or things that are not good morally. Mm-hmm. And so, first of all, I guess, like what do we do in those moments, or what is that like in it's a challenging time in our walk with Christ, I guess, when our duty says, don't do that thing, but the heart says, I want that thing. It's a challenge.
It is. And, it's good even just to name that, it's like that's a common experience. And even some work, that we're doing with, the parish and the high schoolers as they're growing in their literal freedom and taking ownership in a lot of their desires of this idea to say like, you're going to be faced with a lot of temptations or options and things. And, the ability to kind of discern, but also like to understand, to say, is this a real good, or is this on the appearance of a thing? And and sometimes that being caught in that struggle, to be like, not that it's okay to fall, but to say like this is the human experience. Like this is a battle that we all fight. Freedom just doesn't come easily. It requires sacrifice. It requires work. And maybe we'll dive into a little bit deeper. But for myself, it was like it's a mental war for me. Sometimes is even how I view things, how I think about things, often leads to my action. If it's a virtuous act, or it's falling into some of these sins, or addictions and some of that stuff that you went into, is I often find my thinking lays the framework a lot for me.
Oh yeah. I'm trying to think of some examples of that. So even the example of, not one I use in the homily, but unforgiveness is one. Where something's that feeling of hurt or of even hatred, and it's a strange thing to want to hold on to, but that happens sometimes, right? When like I know I'm called to forgive, I know holding on to the unforgiveness is really just hurting me. But there's a weird attraction at the same time sometimes of holding on to the hurt and the hatred.
Yeah, and I mean, you even talked about that in some sense of like, sometimes the thing that on the first encounter we know is not good, over time it starts to become appealing because it's normalized, or it becomes kind of routine, and sometimes even when we know like a thing, this will sound maybe gross or weird, is I had a weird foot injury years ago, and I knew it was wrong. Not wrong, it was like a moral thing, but I was like, it had to get addressed in this, and I'm just lazy and putting things off. I never got really addressed, and it's almost like I got used to the pain.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, and in some part of like, not to say I liked it, but it was almost like, this is just who I am now. Right. This pain is just a thing that's there, you know. And a few loved ones in my life were like, "Call me, you're ridiculous. Like, just go get this dealt with." Yeah. Right. But it almost, that seemed like, well, no, like this has just become a normal pattern of my thing, and the work to get rid of it seemed harder than just to endure it. Right. And
that's amazing what familiarity can do. Huh? Yeah. When you get used to something, it's hard to imagine life without it. Even something you can, like, objectively looking at, you think, no, like, life is better without foot pain. but somehow it's comfortable or used to it.
Yeah, and I mean, you could go into, I mean, you gave examples of addictions, but even simpler sins, right? Or that's a great example of even unforgiveness or hatred. And I think I was telling you beforehand of this quote from some author, and this idea of saying we hold on to hatred because even though we know maybe we need to give it up or go, the reality is maybe we understand that if we surrender this hatred, right, and we seek forgiveness or reconciliation, is like we know that there's maybe a conversion required underneath, right? Yeah. There's a need for the hard work, and that can seem daunting. That it's like, you know, maybe it's just easier to live with the unforgiveness. Yeah. And that's like a very subtle, maybe unconscious thing that's going in our lives, but we have to sometimes, you know, actually really, you know, call it out and be aware of, you know, how we're thinking, how we're going about stuff.
And like what you say about calling it out too, because so often sin thrives in the darkness, or it thrives because we don't quite name it as it is. Right? Like, it's not unforgiveness. It's just, I don't know what the word I would use for it, but it's just kind of the way that things are, you know. I just kind of don't want to address it.
Yeah, and it's interesting on that framework if we're, you know, sitting on unforgiveness, but I was just thinking of the idea of sometimes for me, not that I would never say I doubt, you know, God could heal this or free me of this or make things better. You know, I would never say that explicitly, but I think sometimes my law of action was like, well, that's just my lot in life.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like that's kind of just a soundtrack that you kind of just play, you know, it's just like, yeah, that's just, this is the hand I was dealt.
Oh, okay.
You know, not believing that, you know, God could change the cards. Yeah. Like really that he's the dealer, you know, there is that almost like in a negative connotation, like a surrender to the way of things, right? That sin has hold on my life or on the legacy of my family, and that we can never.
Yeah, and that freedom isn't possible even. Yeah. In a sense. And along with that too, I think is we sometimes hear from people like, well, that's just the way that I am. Like, if you don't like it, like, that's just the way that I am. And sometimes it can be true, but it can be an excuse too to stay in, I don't know, anger or gossip or all sorts of things, right? But to say, well, that's just the way that I am, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, what faith would say, you know, that's a bit of a strong thing that you're kind of implying there, is to say sometimes we present sin as personality traits.
Yeah.
You know, to say, well, he's just a grumpy person. I was like, what?
He doesn't have to be.
He doesn't have to be, maybe. You know, like, we all, like,
the Lord made him for spectrum.
Love. But it is that idea of, like, you know, habitual sin is not a personality trait. Yeah. That's just a battle you haven't won yet or chosen to fight.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's the case a little bit in my life.
And maybe I've learned to desire that, because there are things in being a grumpy person that somehow is desirable.
Yeah. And it's interesting as we maybe literally flip the page, but, you know, approach this idea of, you know, the Old Testament, the idea of the Israelites. And my thought is also, I've really only sometimes maybe would start the battle with some of these sins, you know, as example, unforgiveness, or if it's addiction or drinking, you know, you take your spectrum of what it is for you, is when I started to be convinced of a higher level of freedom, that it was attainable. And for me, that was what am I actually looking at? What not literally, but also even spiritually, like what am I fixed upon?
Oh, like the examples in your life.
And so that was even the idea of, not that it would be broken examples, but as my wife and I were even dating and getting engaged, there was, I don't know where it comes from. I can't really credit anything, but there was this intentionality of like, we need to look at like good examples of marriage.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And it was not that we both love our parents are going in there, and there's a lot that we've replicated, but there's also some stuff, and they would acknowledge it too, that it's like, well, maybe we don't want to replicate that piece of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it was also like, and also, as we notice, and I see in my children, is sometimes they're resistant to listen to the advice that comes from their family members.
Yeah.
And so you look to external sources.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, like who's a young married couple that we think is doing it right?
Yeah.
What's one we can kind of mirror off of? Because we started to believe and attain that a holy marriage is a doable thing.
Right.
And
when that's true. And when you see it, then it seems possible.
Yeah.
Right?
And so we assented to the idea, but then we still struggled to be like, well, what does that look like, right? And to say, maybe we're not looking closer to home or whatever. So then to seek out those examples, and from that came maybe the persistence or resilience to say, okay, we can do the hard work to get there. And I think that works for, that's a virtuous goal, but also to overcome sins in this too is like, okay, who's somebody maybe further down the path who's had a similar journey or a similar battle,
right?
But is on the other side of it. I'm gonna look to them, and I'm also gonna look to the Word of God and what God's calling me towards. Yeah.
And part of that, when you use that battle language, it kind of brings you to the first reading that I talked about as well. Mm-hmm. And these are the readings for the scrutinies, because we did the scrutinies for anyone following along. And that first reading is about God's people in the desert. They've been set free from slavery in Egypt. They're in the desert now, and they're having a hard time. And they ask, it's the most amazing question they ask Moses is, why did you take us out of Egypt? And I imagine if I were Moses, I would have got really angry at that question because you were slaves. Because the Egyptians enslaved you and killed your children, and you cried out to God for help, and you worked amazing miracles and wonders to set you free. That's why we're here.
You're saying it a lot nicer than I think the tone of what it would have been.
I would have been like,
"Are you kidding me?"
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like,
remember what was going on? But it is also so very relatable.
Yeah, 100%.
That when I try to leave a sin behind, especially one that I've become very accustomed to, or when I try to take on a new good thing that I'm not accustomed to, there is a process, there's a time in which that is really hard. And I don't have the habits in place yet. I don't have the freedom to do these things or to not do these things yet. And the old life, like, it does call to you. Like, was it really that bad? Like, can you really go without this? Like, why am I on this journey? Why am I trying to get away from this thing? I could, as much as I will want to make fun of them for their question, why do you take us out of Egypt? I could relate to it completely too.
Yeah, no, and that's good, because it can be easy sometimes when we go to the scriptures in the Old Testament to be like, oh, bunch of idiots. Like, like, how do they not get it? And then you're like, wait, maybe I should flip this around on myself.
Yeah.
But it is even that idea, and I was remarking to you earlier, I've been journeying with, thousands of people doing this Bible in a year thing, kind of reading plan along with this podcast with Father Michael, and he was kind of just journeying through this part pretty recently. And it's interesting to, when you read through that whole time of like, you got Leviticus and then Deuteronomy, kind of Moses' last chance, because he got angry and hit a rock twice, he doesn't get to go into the Holy Land, right? And so he's giving his last spiel, to them to say, okay, you're going to go in, let's recap all the rules in this. And it was like, almost like God is like, I need to show you the way to live, right? Because you're just going to replicate what you saw and what you experienced in Egypt, right? For 400 years or whatever it was. And it's interesting. He remarked a few times, and I kind of sat with it of like, I know I'm going to say these things and I know you're going to fail, but I'm going to say it anyways, but this idea of like, but you need to know like your true north, right? You need to know what you're called to.
Yeah.
So even when you fall, what to get up and what to keep your eyes fixed on. And, I could really relate to that too, right? And it's understandable to say, even once okay, life with the Egyptians was not great, and we want to go here, but it's like, we still had hard lessons to learn, and they still fail sometimes, and they had 40 years in the desert to get figured out and get prepared of like, that's a lot in my life, maybe not 40 years for everything, but there's been periods of like, where I know maybe this sin is dominating my life and I need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't disappear right away.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like the idea of like you can go to confession and, with a contrite heart and say like, and I choose never to sin again. And like an hour later, you might fall and go into there, right? And hopefully longer than that. But but the reality is like that's possible and it could happen. And those triggers and temptations are still going to be there. Like we can't just like go live in a hut, all of us, and be removed of these things. And that you build up resilience, right? You build up. For me, in my own life, is I got through failure. I got stronger.
Yeah,
but not specifically the failure that made me strong, but my commitment to trying.
Yeah, and
the getting up again, right? And the response, and eventually, you can build up that strength. And ultimately, it's like it's not my own strength.
Yeah,
right. It is going to the Lord and say, I need your grace. I need your support.
And that's a point too. And thanks for that example, because I think there's a lot there. Like definitely, like that's a story of building freedom, right? It's building up those virtues to be who God calls you to be. But also, and one thing I'm very aware of is I give these homilies about like kind of what we do to build freedom. That the biggest power in all of this is Christ, and we're cooperating with Him. We're doing our little piece along with it. But to think that we're doing this all by ourselves is also to set ourselves up for disappointment along the way and frustration and just putting too much. We can put too much weight on ourselves as well. But then we're always doing this in the grace of God.
It's as we're in the season of Lent and approaching Easter Vigil, and with the scrutinies, and we had the right election there recently, and hearing the stories of people in our own community choosing to to be received into the church and be baptized is I love their stories and their journeys, and massive conversion stories, and of big and small, and heroic ones and ones that seem very subtle. But I often find a theme, not that they're all different stories, but there seems to be a point that I often find in people's stories of when they give up.
Okay.
In a certain sense of saying, I can't do this on my own anymore, right?
Yeah.
This is when they realize that there's somebody else we need to invite in, or who's beckoning them forward, is to say that, I need Christ.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I always get caught up in the Easter Vigil, was like, man, like it's a radical action that they're taking, right? To say like, I need Christ in my life, right? And to live for Christ. And it's a good reminder to all of us,
Yeah.
And even, you talked about a little bit there in the readings of the woman at the well, right? And even with her story and all that, Christ knows that she still even has the ability to say like, give me that living water.
Yeah.
Like, I need that,
And we do see her transformed by her time with Christ.
100%.
Really clearly.
Yeah.
And that gets me to maybe the last thing to touch on here is we've talked a lot about what it is to not be free, to have the bad ordering of desire. What you desire is what's not good. But I think it is worth too reflecting a little bit on, because we also have this experience of the right ordering of desire. Mm-hmm. When we enjoy things that are truly good, when we desire things that are truly good, because that is ultimately God's will for us. Right? So even I love my favorite part of the homily, honestly, is listing off these things of some right ordering of desire, but enjoying giving a gift as much as receiving it.
Yeah,
there's freedom in that. When you stop to help someone and it feels good to help them, imagine if helping someone and you felt terrible, that would be really tough. But the fact that there is an enjoyment in that, or when we see something that is wrong, we see an injustice, and it makes us, and it does bother us, which is something that should happen. And then the bothering drives us to do something. Mm-hmm. Or the joy of being with people we love, taking delight in prayer. To me, that's freedom, right? When we love things that are lovable.
And I don't want to say the word easy, because it's not easy necessarily. But when you start to notice that you can live in those rhythms, and it's your normal disposition.
Yeah,
right?
there is an ease to it.
So there is an ease to it, but I don't want to be like it's like a hack or whatever. Yeah. But the sense of when I have those days, and it's not every day, but when those days is it was easy to love my child today.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That, when my child asks for a good thing and I can just give it. And some of it is literally, it's just time.
Yeah.
Or just to play a board game and to say that was a gift to give my daughter a time to play a board game that I smoked her at, but
she's got to do that.
She's got to learn.
The sign of respect to me.
But it's honestly, for myself, that's literally why I kind of do what I do. Mm-hmm. And sometimes my wife and I have had conversations. She's like, why do you still work for the church and going in there? You know, like the scandals and this. Not that the sheriff's trying to get me out of there, but like a lot of people look like, yeah, there's a lot of grief. Like you could be doing other things and going in there. And I was like, that's true. You know, and it's not even a heroic badge. Like I'm not even trying to, you know, that's not at all what I mean. But it is a sense of like I receive more than I have ever given.
Yeah.
You know, in giving.
Yeah.
And ministering and helping to see young people come alive is like, it's the greatest thing.
Yeah.
Like it's the greatest thing. And to know that I could just be a small tool in God's tool belts, right? And that all he asks is for us to give what we can.
Yeah. Yeah. And seeing the Lord at work in people's lives is just such a privilege.
Yeah. And it was a natural thing because somebody did that for me, right? And so it just became a natural response, you know. And it's interesting to be on the other side of it, where you didn't even notice it when you're in the midst of it, right? And someone kind of affirms or says something, and you're always like, because you know, in that sense, it was like that's just the Lord. That's just the Lord living and moving, and it's great to be a witness to that, right?
Yeah. And like we say, it's a natural thing, because that's such a big part of this building virtue and this freedom is, especially as kids, if kids have these good moral examples and these examples of good Christian freedom, like some of the stuff can just, and it should be natural in terms of like the nature as God made it to be. It should be natural to love and be kind and to be generous. And as we grow up with those examples, that's often how we develop it, right? By seeing people living it well.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it is they're right and good desires in their own right, but it is also when you've overcome, when you've had the cheap knockoff, and then you experience the real fruits and the goodness that God desires for you. I was like, I'm never going back, right? Yeah. And you do go back, you do fall, and you go in there.
Sometimes then we do, and why did I go back?
But then you at least you've had that experience now to kind of be like, what a fool am I, right? Yeah. And I fall flat on your face, and you come to the Lord, and it's just it's amazing to have those transformations. And in a period of my life, it was like I know what it's like to have lived a life in high school and university when I thought it was free, and to be like I was miserable. And like I would say my life is legitimately harder now than it was back then, but I also feel a level of freedom and a capacity to love that is unmatched from where I was before, when I thought there was no strings on me. So which is funny that out of a base of duty, of obligation, rules, some of the stuff we talk about in our faith has laid the foundation for my heart to have the ability to love in ways I never could have dreamed of before.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the message, right? That's the Christian freedom that we're trying to put before ourselves this Lent.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any parting shots, but I just liked your last line. I don't know if it was the last line of the homily, but in your notes anyways, where you said, "Let God work in us. What we love is truly lovable." Yeah. It's just a great kind of image and picture to kind of cling on to.
That's it. I think in the homily I had that, and also that we would desire what's truly good and love what is truly lovable.
Yeah.
But that is God's will for us, right? That's what he wants to do in us as we follow him.
Yeah. And it's, what was the last quote that kind of ties in? Is this St. Augustine who says, "Love God and do what you will"? Or
I think it's love and do what you want.
Love and do what you want. But it is that right premise, right? To say it's like
true love.
It's true love, right? Yeah. It's living out those right desires, but then to say, God has a lot that he's offering you, but putting the first things first and get that desire ordered correctly, and who knows what the Lord is up to in your life. And
amen.
That's exciting. I'm excited to see where we go next, Father.
Oh yeah, I got another one coming.
But stay tuned. Join us next week, and we will see where that goes. And just if you haven't, check our website, sign up to the snapshot. You'll see announcements of how we're gonna see more of your faces here. So not this weekend, starting the 19th.
Right.
All that stuff increases. So stay tuned for all that news and those logistics. And until then, be well, and I guess we'll see you later.
Great. Thank you.